how I wish I was Baudelaire and in the 19th century and could just sort of grab money off my mother and not go to any work at all. But then I guess I don't wish I was Baudelaire, because I'd be a poetic genius but also die and sort of suffer an agonizing long death from
some drawbacks,
sexual diseases. Yeah. Things around about.
I'm Matthew Buckley Smith, and you're listening to Slee Rickets. Thank you all for listening. It has been a busy little stretch of time. I am in the middle of technically it's a residency. I'm not there, so I'm not a resident, but I was the late addition to a team, a composer and a lyricist who've been writing a musical for a couple of years, and I was brought in at the last minute to help with some plot stuff. So I'm in the middle of that. It's very busy and fun and crazy. I am actually going to be bringing them on the show soon in a kind of a companion to today's episode, which I think is a really juicy, fun one. Very quickly, though, a couple things I wanted to cover. First, I was in the bookstore the other day, and I saw that Shashi Bhatt's book, The Most Precious Substance on Earth, is available in a really beautiful American hardcover. I have to say, I think the American designers outdid the Canadian ones. It looks great. She was really generous in coming on as a guest a long time ago, way before her book was available in the US. It is episode 16. It's a good conversation if you want to go back and check it out. I will include a link in the show notes to her book, The Most Precious Substance on Earth, which is just like a really fun, delightful, gossipy, sad, funny, buttery, delicious read. Also out now is a new book by Shane McRae called Cain Named the Animal. He was kind enough to send me a copy, and it's really good. Cameron and I actually may be talking about one of the poems from it in an upcoming episode, and there are a number I have dog-eared in there that I may want to bring in. He did the thing that every poet is tempted to do, which is to write a new poem about Orpheus and Eurydice that doesn't suck and that isn't just totally redundant with all of the other many, many poems about Orpheus and Eurydice. And he did. I mean, I think that's one of my favorite poems in the book. I don't think it's a little bit atypical for him, but it's a terrific book. I do hope you will check it out. Cain Named the Animal by Shane McRae. I'll have links to both to that and to Shashi's book in the show notes. Also, boy, I heard from a lot of you about the last episode, The Rabbit Hole, Part 1 and Part 2. So Part 1 is on the main feed, this one, where you're getting this episode. Part 2 is on The Secret Show at sleerickets.substack.com. What Brian and I both heard pretty consistently was that the meatier and certainly more controversial half was the second half. So some people who listened only to the first half said, oh, I thought there was going to be more disagreement. Where was all the controversy? Well, the answer is it's on the fucking Secret Show. So go to sleerickets.substack.com. I want to try an experiment because I do want people to get to hear some of this stuff. There's some really good material on there that most of you have not gotten to hear. So here's what I am going to try. And I'm just going to try this for the month of July because I don't know. Well, it's almost the end of July. Maybe I'll say through the end of summer, through the end of July and August. Here's what I want to try. I am going to go to all of the people who have already subscribed and had paid to subscribe. So you can subscribe for free and just get the very, very occasional email I will send out, which is really almost never. Or you can subscribe for a very low monthly or yearly price and get bonus episodes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to everybody who's already paid to subscribe, and I'm just going to add a free week to their subscription. So you don't have to do anything. If you've already paid to subscribe, don't do anything. I'm just going to add a free week to your subscription. And then to anybody else, if you were already signed up with a free subscription, I'm going to go ahead and do this today or tomorrow. And if you sign up for a free subscription, that is, you just go online to sleeprickets.substack.com, you put in your email address, you don't have to add any credit card, anything, don't have to put anything else, just add your email address. I'm going to give you a free week. So you can sign up anytime through, well, let's just say July and August. And I will, as soon as I see your name on there, I don't check, every day, but as soon as I see your name on there, I will add a free week, and you can just start listening to all of the Secret Show episodes. There are a bunch up there now. I have another little goodie bag one I'm going to add in the next couple days. I think the fan favorites so far are Batshit, which is the 4th one, Mendacity, which is the 7th one, and the Rabbit Hole Part 2. Well, people like that one, and they hate it. And sort of gratifying to me is that we managed to we managed to provoke both people on the right and people on the left. A lot of our conversation ended up, a lot of the disagreement, a lot of the toothier parts of our conversation dealt with this question of how we feel about other people's beliefs when they are radically different from our own. And I think, I'm not going to try to argue with Brian when he's not here, but I think that a lot of the disagreement really came down to a question of the word understand, what it means to understand somebody else's beliefs or somebody else's point of view, whether that means to sympathize with it, to just literally try to get your head around it, or something else, or maybe both and. Anyway, that was a really fun episode. I think that you will enjoy it, or you will enjoy arguing with it. Please do write in. I got a lot of good mail I want to get to, but I think I'm just going to have to dedicate an upcoming episode just to emails because there's some really, really good ones. So I'm going to do that. Not today, not while I'm trying to also do this musical theater non-residency. For now, let's just go to today's episode, which was a great conversation I had with Cameron Clark. You can find Cameron, as always, on Erratosphere. That's, I think, his main haunt, I believe, online. W.T. Clark, there's a link in the show notes. But we talked about rap and musical theater and rhyme. And specifically, we started from this essay that Adam Gopnik had in The New Yorker recently called The Rules of Rhyme, or The End of the Line, or any number of other... he had several other titles that it went by. We had a lot of thoughts about it. So we'll get into that, and then I have a lot of really good stuff in the can right now that I just haven't yet had time to edit, but that's all coming soon, as is an episode. I'm just going to do a solo one for all of the emails, and as well as the like epic AMA that Alice and Brian and I recorded. That was a lot of fun. That's, I think, going to have to be broken in half because it's so fucking long, but so good. So thank you, as always, for listening, and do write to me at sleerickets@gmail.com. But enough fucking housekeeping. Let's get to the show. I got like back-to-back notes from you and Alice a couple of weeks ago. Alice saying like, "Ugh, I read that article in the New Yorker about rhyme. It was terrible. Don't bother." And then you sent me one saying like, "Oh, I read that article in New Yorker about rhyme. Oh, it was pretty good. We should talk about it." And so I sent her a note today saying like, "Oh, I have my thoughts about it, but like I'm curious what your objections were." And she was so much like something Joanna would say. She said, "To be honest, I just skimmed it and I thought this guy thinks he's so funny." Which like is pretty fair. I think like he does think he's pretty funny. Whatever else you might have to say about it. But it was referred to by a few different people in the poetry world. I saw the impression I got, apart from the note I got from Alice and then the one I got from you, was that people in the formal poetry world seem to be happy about it, and I read it and I have very mixed feelings. But I was curious what it was that caught your eye about it, because you have a great deal of knowledge of the formal world of poetry, but you don't. I mean, as we've said, like almost nobody actually identifies as a new formalist, but you in particular seem to sort of resistant to any camp or category or like set of aesthetic loyalties. So I certainly don't think of you as a new formalist. I think of you as someone who like has a knowledge of meter and rhyme, but sort of operates relatively free of them at the moment. But yeah, tell me what you thought
Yeah,
of this.
yeah, that is. I'm very fascinated by meter and rhyme. Meter maybe more than rhyme, but fascinating both. And I'd say I write 40 or 30% in meter and rhyme. But yeah, no, thanks for that. I do like the idea that I sort of stay out of these static camps. So I saw this on a thread on a writersphere, as I see most things brought up, and I looked at it, and I have as much mixed feelings about it as you do, especially my first problem is its treatment of rap music, especially its dating, which I think is sort of the problem with most writers who come to write about rap music, in that they either have no clue what rap music is and they go to the very famous ones,
Yeah.
or they go to the rap music they remember from their childhood.
Right.
And my second problem is it's massive. The second half, I find it becomes more and more boring as it goes on, and that's mainly because I'm not as interested in light verse as the writer seems to think I am. And I also think he misses a massive conceptual trick, because he isn't really able to talk about modern or contemporary rhyming poetry, and especially contemporary rhyming poetry, which isn't light verse. That seems a massive gap in the article, which I very much wish it talked about.
Yeah. So the occasion for the article seems to be that Daniel Levin Becker published this book called What's Good, which is about rap, I believe, and it at least talks a lot about rhyme. I don't know that rhyme is the focus of the book, but he has a lot to say about rhyme in this book, What's Good. And then it felt to me like, my joke to Alice was that, like, some guy published a book about rap, and then Adam Gopnik said, "Hey, this is going to be a great opportunity for me to write about musical theater."
Yes.
It's like much
so
of the
true.
article is about musical theater. Like he knows seemingly nothing about rap except what he read in this book, and then lots about musical theater and like a smidgen about contemporary poetry that's not musical theater.
Yes.
And then but like, instead of just saying like, "Hey, I have some smart and worthwhile things to say about Gilbert and Sondheim and Cole Porter, and like this book on rap was fine," he needs to come up with some sort of weird unified theory, which, like, the sort of joint theses that I could glean were that lots of different kinds of rhyme can be pleasing. Like, people can enjoy rhyme of different sorts, and that no type of rhyme has an intrinsic political agenda. And like, I can't argue with either of those claims. And I think that's partly why some of the formalist people seem to like it, was that it was sort of like a very clumsy apology for, like, saying like, "Hey, rhyme can be good." And like, just that much is rare enough to encounter in like contemporary mainstream, critical letters, that like, okay, we'll take the win, but it's done in a really odd way. I mean, particularly like his argument about how rhyme is not politically charged. He makes that argument by like making like claim after claim about all the ways in which rhyme was politically charged in one time or another, but in different directions. And it just felt like almost all of his claims about morality or politics were just totally beside the point.
Right.
We're just like wrong.
And he starts off the article with this sort of long conversation about slant rhyme, and especially in hip hop. And you think at first it's going to be sort of his attempt to celebrate slant rhyme or something, right, or to attempt to say that slant rhyme is in some way superior to full rhyme, or at least should be given more credit. And then he turns around halfway through and goes, "No, actually, full rhyme's fine as well. And here's Stephen Sondheim, and here's some other people. And yeah, no, rhyme's great." And yeah, it just boils down to, like, in the end, he just says rhyme is good. All forms of rhyme is good, and yeah, everything's good. I mean, I guess maybe the New Yorker aren't crying out for long essays on musical theatre, so he had to sort of grab his opportunity when he could. But it's a very confused piece, I think.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like, it feels sort of annoying in a way that at least to my ear sounds like very of our time. I mean, I realize, like, I just reread Shelley's Apology for Poetry, and I realize, like, since forever people have been saying X poetry is bad for you. No, it's good for you. And in both cases, I think, like, Jesus, shut the fuck up. But this is like, has a lot of that. You're right. He quotes. A lot of it is he makes arguments by quoting other people approvingly and then sort of backing away from them after he's quoted them. He says, "This is, as Levin Becker knows, a familiar romantic defense of the rough, the handmade, the artisanal. What sounds to the stuffy like simple carelessness, whether it's Kanye West pairing Thirsty with 30 or Emily Dickinson pairing Crumb with Home, is the enlivening evidence of free men and women at work." That argument to begin with, which is like a very, very familiar argument, that stuffy snobs like don't like imprecision or looseness, but like vital, exciting, energetic artists like to mismatch and use near rhyme. But I mean, I had to say that the Kanye West pairing Thirsty with 30 or Emily Dickinson pairing Crumb with Home, like, not only do I think there is literally no stuffy person anywhere who objects to Emily Dickinson pairing Crumb with Home, but like, definitely if there were such a person, it would not be the same. Like, those are not the same kind of slant rhyme, and people respond to them very differently, and it's for very specific and like fairly self-evident reasons. Like that he and Levin Becker talks about here, Gopnik on Levin Becker on slant rhyme says, "It's not that perfect rhyme can't accomplish the same things," he says, praising a Tupac lyric, "and even as a crack fiend, mama, you always was a black queen, mama, but that the imperfection is what makes it feel purposeful and personal." So, like, first of all, I mean, I'm guessing that when Tupac says that line, he drops the D from fiend. But if you don't drop the D from fiend, it's not a true rhyme. It's not a perfect, like, if you're going to give one example of a perfect rhyme, that's not one. But even more to the point, like, the imperfection of the rhyme is what makes it feel purposeful and personal. Bullshit. Like, bullshit. Like, there's really the outlier here is not rap, it's musical theater, because rap is just doing exactly what songwriting has been doing since forever, which is privileging assonance over consonants. Like, because in song and in vocal performance, the vowel drastically overwhelms the consonant. All that really matters is that you match the vowel. And in rap, you know, when you are innovating and coming up with, you know, new ways of rhyming and new turns and surprising effects, you do so, you know, with often it's feminine rhyme or triple rhyme, because that's harder to do, but it's almost always assonant. And I would even say, like, you can look for any number of examples where like it's clear that the rapper doesn't, like, rap doesn't honestly distinguish in many cases between assonant rhyme and true rhyme.
And I think that's even more the case nowadays.
Right, yeah. Believe me, sweetie, I got enough to feed the needy. Like, believe me and sweetie and needy. Sweetie and needy are true rhyme in that case because of how he pronounces sweetie, but believe me is assonant rhyme, and it doesn't matter. It's the same effect. Like rap, like songwriting, only for the most part, only cares about assonance. The one time he uses the term assonance twice, and once it's a list in which it's not clear what he means, but in the other time he uses it to mean literally the opposite of assonance. Like it made me cringe for the New Yorker's famous fact checkers, because he uses assonance to mean either dissonance or consonance, which is the exact opposite of assonance.
Where is that? What section
he says,
is that?
Let me find it. It's Phyllis McGinley has a line about where she rhymes toaster with disaster, which is a good consonant rhyme. And he uses, I mean, it's an awkwardly constructed sentence, which is why it's not totally clear what he means, but it's clear that the one thing he can't mean in that context is assonance. He says, here's the Phyllis McGinley lines are: his paper propped against the electric toaster, nicely adjusted to his morning use. Daniel at breakfast studies the world disaster and sips his orange juice. And then Gopnik's response to that is, the assonance of toaster and disaster sits just aside the strict scheme. No, No, I mean, I think what he means is maybe the dissonance of toaster and disaster, but toaster and disaster is consonants. What it's certainly not is assonance. He also uses, I think he's trying to be fancy, or he's also trying to be maybe like egalitarian, and he uses the phrase monosyllabic prayers, where what he should say is masculine rhymes, because then the result is that he seems to be referring to several two-syllable words as monosyllabic.
Maybe he had the word disaster stuck in his mind so much that he accidentally forgot that although disaster and assonance sound slightly similar, they mean they are not related, and that's how assonance came into the picture. I don't know.
I think it might be the thing that happens when people use when there's a dissonant didn't feel hoity-toity enough. The same way that people will use reticent when they mean hesitant. Because it sounds like a slight difference. It's slightly different that way, or continuous when what they mean is continual.
It sounds slightly more elite.
Yeah. What's the other one? Untrammeled when what they mean is like untrampled. So I think it's very common, and I'm sure I've done this stuff before as well. But come on, New Yorker fact checkers, somebody fix this stuff. Good Lord.
Poor New Yorker. This article's huge. I mean, poor fact checkers checking for all the lines of musicals he quotes one after another. He really has a problem with not understanding when enough's enough in terms of examples, I think.
And it's so many lines about so many quotations from musicals. He also I don't fucking care, but because he makes such a stink about how it's so important in musicals for you to use, particularly in a certain stripe of musical, and he cites Gilbert and Sondheim as being really brilliant, true rhymers with really ostentatious, complex. The rhyme he cites for Gilbert is not true rhyme. He's rhyming a voiced S with an unvoiced S, which fucking I don't do. Fine, whatever, you do what you like, but the same. I don't know. It just feels like it is. Again, you could just write a nice essay about hey, rhyme's great, there's no reason to oppose these different camps. I think Becken Lever or whatever his name is sounds silly. At least his arguments about rhyme sound silly. Maybe it's a good book otherwise, but his arguments about rhyme sound silly. Ruskin's arguments about ancient architecture sound silly. What is the thing? Oh, the thing that makes me fucking crazy that Gopnik cites. He refers to Pope as the chilly Augustan smoothness and rule-bound rhyme of Pope, and Pope.
There's not much chilly about Pope.
Pope wrote many poems I don't like, and his translations of the Iliad and the Odyssey are not known for their fleetness and elegance. But come on now, that's how you're going to summarize Pope? I just for the sake of anybody who's not already familiar, O cursed dear horrors of all conscious night, how glowing guilt exalts the keen delight, provoking demons all restraint remove, and stir within me every source of love. I hear thee, view thee, gaze o'er all thy charms, and round thy phantom glue my clasping arms. That's the chilly Augustan smoothness and rule-bound rhyme of Pope. Come on.
Oh, yeah. Pope is by no means my favorite poet, but
no, me neither.
The Dunciad is a savage poem.
Oh God, yeah. And then he says he again rap's great, and rap is different than why does there need to be this weird, even when it's not moral, it's aesthetically moralized speech where he says freed from a narrow vein of what verse is and does, rap was more richly in touch with all the resources of the language. Oh, right. Okay. I'm sorry that Alexander Pope and Shakespeare and Donne were not sufficiently in touch with the rich resources of the English language. Come on. It's an absurd line of argumentation.
I think this comes back to my theory that I think most sort of great poems, most great poets like Donne or Shakespeare were not just in touch with all as many or more resources than the average rapper, but had a more refined sense of those resources than the average rapper.
And the average anybody. I mean,
of course.
Because there's great. I mean, that's the other thing that was fun. You sent me a whole list of.
Rap. Did you listen to them?
I listened to all of it. I didn't listen to all of it more than once, but I did try to get. I listened to all of it, and I took some notes. And there's some great. I mean, really great. They're also just to just to like demonstrate how out of like how misplaced so much of this is. Like in addition to getting lines where you see that like rap often does not distinguish between assonant and true rhyme. The other one, which I know is very famous, I know Jay-Z is very uncool, but flyer than a piece of paper bearing my name, I got the hottest chick in the game wearing my chain. Flyer than a piece of paper bearing my name is, I just think, brilliant. But like the rhyme there, it's all that matters is the vowel. And then Nas in the Illmatic, which you specifically recommended, so much of that is written in true rhyme. Like it drops deep as it doesn't. It drops deep as it does in my breath. I never sleep because sleep is the cousin of death. That's straight out of the fucking Renaissance.
That's a beautiful line.
Beyond the walls of intelligence, life is defined. I think of crime when I'm in a New York state of mind. I mean, that's three true rhymes with, you know, two of them being complex consonant sounds. I ain't the type of brother make you made for you to start testing. Give me a Smith and Wesson. I'll have persons undress, and he uses a different word instead of persons. Yeah. And then testing, you know, I'm not sure how he pronounces it, but that could very well be a true rhyme for Wesson and Dressen.
Oh yeah, no, it is. Yeah, no, there's no. I think there's no T in test. Yeah, he says testing. I think. Yeah, no, but Nas is. I think Nas is a slight exception in the list.
Clearly some of these were like some of the later ones you quoted. I quote Juice World, which has their song "Empty" has 20 million views on YouTube. That was some dog shit. Like those lyrics were terrible, and that was like the worst of bad 90s emo. My world revolves around a black hole, the same black hole that's in place of my soul. Empty, I feel so goddamn empty. I may go rogue. Don't tempt me. Big bullet holes, tote, semi-auto. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, it's terrible. There's nothing there. I did see you cited specifically Aesop Rock as your favorite, and I mean he's very impressive. I also definitely see why it's like something, because it definitely makes sense to me that this is a rapper you would specifically like, because he's dense and inventive and does not like, he seems much more concerned with like rich language play than with like a straightforward lyrical expression or claim. That's quite a bit of gusto he muster up to make a dark horse rush like enough's enough. It must have struck a nerve, so they huff and puff till all the king's men fluster and clusterfuck. I mean, it's really impressive.
I mean, yeah, I think Go for Guts is a very hard-hitting song as well. I think that the other song I recommended by Aesop Rock was
I know I have lines from that too.
I think that's incredibly emotionally hard-hitting, but also emotionally hard-hitting because it has so much verbal energy and creativity and linguistic invention in the first two verses, and then it suddenly drops away into a series of sheer, almost prosaic statements, which I think most contemporary poets would write the third verse in sort of their sort of page poem shaped version, but not write anything like the first two verses. But I think for the sheer starkness of the third verse to occur, you need the first two verses, series of incredible, complex, metaphorical mood adjustments. And I think Aesop Rock is I wouldn't place him alongside sort of the rappers who are hailed nowadays as sort of lyrical geniuses like Kendrick Lamar, because I think Aesop Rock is a genius of language in a more sort of Jeffrey Hillian type way of creating emotional landscapes in linguistic terms. And I do think
it did remind me of Jeffrey Hill reading his stuff. Yeah. No, he really did. Like if you were to pick a rapper to incarnate, like that was the link that I saw. Yeah.
I mean Jeffrey Hill. He does. Did you see my tweet about Jeffrey Hill? I put once out on the Slee Ricketts account where he said something like, "And I turned to this woman. I said, I do have a book of rap, and it's called Speech." And I think seven people have read it and liked it.
It was some talk he gave that I cited something else, but it was in the same talk. The sod off talk. And
he says on an interview somewhere that the next Shakespeare of the 21st century will be someone who listens to rap music. And I agree. I think anyone who writes good poems needs to learn from rap music, because I think what rap music does have, which I think most contemporary, the Ada Limons of the world, of the poetry world, and those types of very famous poets don't have, is a verbal energy
Yeah.
that really reinforces a lot of good hip hop music in a sort of a linguistic sense. I think poetry does need to find its way back in some ways to that sort of tough lyric linguistic exterior that rap music seems to have taken up. But
Yeah.
I do think rap poetry does practice something different from rap music, and I think especially in its refinement of the skills of rap music. There's the examples cited in the article, mostly from the 1980s, about 30 years ago, hip hop, which it's
Yeah.
it's incredible how no one seems to be able to quote any hip hop from sort of contemporary nowadays. But the examples cited, none of them seem to me, if I sort of stuck them next to a sort of good poem by sort of any sort of great poets of the past, or even sort of very good poets of, or at least people I consider to be very good poets of today, I don't think any of the verses would stand up, because they are doing things with puns and alliterative effects, which are both much more, I think, much more louder vocally and more conspicuous. And I think that works because they have a different form of localized effect and a different sort of intended wavelength. And because they're being put on a top of musical tracks, which do provide the sort of the meter of hip hop, because you have to rap against the constraints of the bar length and the musical undertracking. They do, to me, create effects that I don't think I would fairly be able to sort of rank next to poetry. But I do think poetry needs to take from rap its sort of rancorous energy and put that more into its linguistic compass, because I think a lot of poems now fall apart because they turn to sort of their moral or objective point and aren't able to sort of interweave that point with their actual sonic body. I think the great problem in contemporary poetry nowadays is that it has lost its grip on sound, in a sense, and the inventiveness that comes when sound and sense is not even connected, but so intermingled that they become inseparable.
Yeah, I was thinking about a couple of distinctions that he does not make in here that feel worth like examining a little bit. One is this distinction between rap, like where rap is different from songwriting. And I think like you see this when if you like, all you have to do is like go through a list of the most admired rappers, of any given era, and you'll see that like, wow, it is, there is no true meritocracy. And I'm sure there's a lot of fuckery going on in like who gets ahead in the rap world. But
for sure.
What is still remarkable is like, you can be super fat, you can be short, you can be tall, you can be ugly, you can have like a weird squeaky voice, you can be like rich, you can be poor, you can have a criminal record, you can be a former teen idol. Like, it truly seems not to matter how you are packaged or presented if you have flow. Like, if it's a thing you can do, that does seem to be really, again, like, I'm sure there's a whole lot of I'm sure, like, just because I'm less familiar with it than I am with poetry or fiction or whatever, like, I'm sure there's a lot going on there that sucks, that has nothing to do with merit. But like, boy, merit seems to have more to do with it than like singer-songwriting, where like you kind of need to be like pretty and thin and know how to dance in many cases and this sort of thing. But it all, like, in the same way as you said, there is a refinement in what we might call page poetry that you don't necessarily find in rap, but it's a refinement in the words, because the words really are all you're working with. Whereas like, it's not just that in rap you have music and you have vocals, but that like in a like a folk song is in some ways a template that you could, like, there's a long and rich tradition of rock and roll songs and folk songs and ballads being covered. But like, covers in rap are I know they do exist, but it's not nearly the same kind of tradition. And that's partly, I think, because the individual performance of the person doing it matters so much. Like that is not, it's not fair to put rap lyrics on the page next to page poetry, because the page poetry is its complete self, and the rap lyrics are like one facet of a pretty complex art form. The other distinction that he seemed to be totally blind to was that, he says, he talks specifically about Sondheim, saying that what's the Sondheim line about?
Is it the Sondheim line about how any true rhyme will suddenly perk up any line of blandness?
Yeah. So Sondheim says, both identities, meaning exact repetitions of a stressed syllable, like rhyming a word with the same word, and false rhymes are death on wit. Stephen Sondheim declared in his own testament, a perfect rhyme can make a mediocre line bright and a good one brilliant. A perfect rhyme snaps the word and with it the thought vigorously into place, rendering it easily intelligible. A near rhyme blurs it. And he's pretty dismissive of this. Like, he basically says that's true only for Sondheim, but he also goes on, like he says elsewhere, that like there is at least more of a tradition in the musical theater world of exalting true rhyme. That like he talks about one well-known musical theater writer was scandalized by Lin-Manuel Miranda's rhyme of country with hungry, which is, again, like, it's just simple assonance. Like, it's assonance and with a heavy emphasis on feminine assonance, feminine rhyme assonance, like, because that's what rap does. Like, period. Like, that's what rap does. It did make me wonder, like, well, why would there be, because again, rap is not unusual in preferring assonance to consonants or to true rhyme. Pop songs do that same exact thing, just with less feminine rhyme. But it made me wonder, like, why would there be more of an emphasis on true rhyme in like non-hip hop inflected musical theater, like traditional American musical theater? And I have some guesses, but that seems to be something he's totally not. Like, his explanation is all on behalf of rap, when like rap doesn't need an explanation. Like, rap is totally in line with the traditions of pop music. It's musical theater that's unusual in this respect, that it's songs that care also about true rhyme. Do you have a thought about that?
I hadn't thought about. I had music. It's an question that I don't specifically have an answer to, and I'm sure your guesses will probably be more intelligent than mine. I think it's an odd genre musical pitch. The musicals I have listened to, I've liked some of them. Quickly going back to Hamilton, I think Hamilton's version of rap music is a sort of bastardized hip hop, which is, that line, I'm just like my country, I'm young, scrappy, and hungry. I can't help but cringe at that line, and I have listened to I've listened.
There are many
Hamilton.
Reasons to cringe at that line. I think the assonance is the least troublesome part.
No, the rhyme is fine, but the rest of the line, conceptually, I've listened to Hamilton 5 or 6 times. I think it's a very flawed piece of music, and I do think it is working within rap music, but a very a low edge of rap music, right? Sort of bastardized pop aesthetic of rap music. As Brian's pointed out, it has far more in common with musical theater. Like, it's musical theater that is tinted with rap and flavored with rap. But a lot of those songs are basically just straight musical theater songs. Why don't you say your guesses then about why you think musical theater has this obsession with full rhyme, and I'll try and say something clever as the thoughts come to me.
Right. My main guess is that, so whereas like rap is, you get ahead in rap by way of individual innovation, like an individual person, sitting in his room with a book or with his memory, pieces together rhymes and tries to make his voice stand out. In a musical, like the average development period for a piece of musical theater, like a musical that goes to Broadway, the average development time, the mean development time is 7 years. And they're incredibly, it's enormously, extravagantly expensive to produce a musical, particularly in the, and it's really the only type of live theater that still has the bigness of cast and budget that was common for any straight play, in the 1950s. Like, and this is one of the things that's like crazy when you read a lot of the like big classic straight plays of mid 20th century is they'll have like 30 fucking people in the cast. And you're like, Jesus Christ, you have this guy who just comes on for one scene to say one line? Why? Like, and it's because they had a budget for it. They could just do it. And like musicals still have, I mean, the way that like movies now, you have like a guy who's like the clerk in a gas station for once. And like, that's fine because you have the fucking budget for it. Like, why not? Yeah, it's fine. Musicals still operate on that level. And it's partly because, as with like Marvel movies in the theater, like they're big fucking spectacles. Like people go for a big over the top experience, and musicals can deliver that, but they're getting a musical that actually works, like getting all the different pieces, the book, the songwriting, the composition, the music, the song lyrics, and the libretto, and all of the acting, and the dancing, and all of the tech, getting all of that to work together, and all the elements I'm not even remembering to name, is so difficult, and so it's so easy to fuck up that I think musicals are really, really reliant on convention. Like, I think convention is so important. The same way that like screenwriting is really, really reliant on convention.
Also, with your talk of the spectacle, I think maybe in that sense, full rhymes do add to that sort of sense of spectacularness, because almost everything is so perfect in that way, right?
Yeah,
I'm trying not to resort to the good, the morally influenced aesthetics of the article, but in that way, everything is so clean and precisely made that adds to sort of the spectacle of it.
That is really true. And I mean, and that's the other thing, is that because a musical, like the goal is to make it big and like to make it run for a long time, every move and sound and gesture is really crystallized, so that like we saw at the big dramatic center in Durham, we saw a touring production of the Book of Mormon, and then we recently saw a touring production of Hamilton. And I saw the like filmed version of the original cast of Hamilton on the TV, and then I at least knew of some of the actors from the original cast of Book of Mormon. And what you see is, you know, like often very good touring actors doing impersonations of those actors. Like they're doing the original performance. Like they're hitting all of the same marks. They're doing the same ticks. It's like it's all a well-oiled machine, and it's not just. I don't mean to dismiss them. I just think like in order for the musical to work, it is like a clock. It's all got to be just so. And so I think you're right that just as the spectacle, you know, the visual spectacle has to be precise. The part of the thrill maybe is the perfect landing of every one of those rhymes as well. I mean, the same, like, because that was the place where like some of these art forms seem to, or genres really seem to overlap, was like I was looking at some of those closing couplets from Don Juan, and then some of the like really silly triple rhymes that he quotes from Sondheim and Gilbert, and then like in good showy lines from rap songs. Like that's I think like now hatred is by far the longest pleasure. Men love in haste, but they detest at leisure. Painkillers only put me in a twilight where pretty pussy and Benjamin is the highlight. Like I think like that. And then what was the Sondheim line where he rhymes personable with coercionable? Like to me, like those are all, that's where you see some of the same impulse. And again, it has nothing to do with morality. It has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with pleasure. It's you know, it's just that the occasion and the convention and the expectations might affect the version of that pleasure that's going to be most appealing in the moment.
Yeah, and there is to an extent a spectacle in hip hop. I mean, you know, this quote from the article, he says, he quotes a rap lyric that is more concentration on my cadence might cloud your mind, controlling your movements capaciously, which is, I mean, I think of what Igor Stravinsky said about one of Benjamin Britten's adaptations of Wilfred Owen's poems, and he says something about the boisterous literalisms of it. And I mean, this is full of literalisms of an incredibly the literal effect and literalizing of this cadence into sort of this incredibly alliterative, almost badly alliterative. I mean, these two lines are, I don't think they're very good, even
the second line is worse. For like, if we can get like super nerdy for a second, I would say that more concentration on my cadence might cloud your mind. That is alliteration. Controlling your movements capaciously, I think, is not alliteration, because like alliteration as a sonic organizing principle is concerned not with diction or grammar, but with sound. And so what matters is not whether the consonant sound, like just as you can alliterate K with C, it doesn't matter what consonant you're using, it matters what consonant sound you're using. And it also doesn't matter where in the word the consonant sound appears, it matters where in the stress it appears. And concentration, cadence, and cloud all fall on stressed syllables. Controlling and capaciously, those are unstressable. Like that's why they don't sound as good, because what you should be matching is the t in trolling and the p in capaciously. That's my super nerdy take on those lines.
No. I mean, the first line, and also because the first line has much more the stresses are much more closely grouped, right? I mean, you almost have a flow of continuous stress syllables on the alliterative words without break. I mean, there is break, but there's not much of it. While the second one has a sudden jolt because you suddenly have movement at a very strong place in the line, and it breaks it up.
You also get the more might and mind in the first line, whereas you only have that movements in the middle of that sort of sloppy second line.
Yeah, but I mean, that second line doesn't rhyme, so I think he must have broken the second line before the end of the bar, or at least the line quoted isn't the full second line, which I am slightly confused by. But I think
you're probably right. Yeah,
I mean, you talk about sort of the virtuosity of rap and how maybe not completely meritocratically, but it has a certain meritocracy in that sort of search of virtuosity in everybody in a verbal sense.
Though Juice WRLD tried to prove me wrong.
I sent you, it was Juice WRLD and Blueberry Faygo most prominently, sort of rappers who don't flow because they are relying on a more melodic auto-tuned sense. Yeah. And that is a pretty sizable subgenre of rap music today. Yeah. That is
the Travis Scott and the Young Thug were also didn't tickle me, but Juice WRLD was the worst.
I mean, Young Thug I admire Young Thug because he does do things with sound and with lyrics that are different from most auto-tune rappers, but he isn't in a lyrical sense. He just likes to play around with his pronunciation. But it's a nice refreshment compared to sort of Juice WRLD and Travis Scott, who are sort of very well. Juice WRLD's dead now, but they one of them churned, and Travis Scott churns out this type of music, which isn't very similar to the rap music of the 1990s or early 2000s, and not at all similar to the rap music quoted in this article. And I just wish more conversations of rap took modern hip hop into account, even if they dislike it. But it just seems to me that a lot of writers don't really have a good understanding of rap music at all.
Like it seems to me like some of these the distinctions you make are largely between like classic, or at this point like almost canonical rap like Biggie and Tupac, and then the newer auto-tune rappers, which I know you've talked elsewhere about, like the slide of a lot of contemporary rap into something that seems fairly indistinguishable from just like straight pop music. And then the other category that seems significant is conscious rap, or like conscious or political rap. But that's conscious is the term that one encounters in rap, and it seems significant, though I don't. I mean, the only distinction, like in my little bit of exposure, my rule of thumb with like Christian rock, like because Christian rock is another category, though, like it's for good reason. There's very little Christian rock people,
You even get Christian
like
rap as well.
yeah, Christian rap. I'm sure that's it. But like the reason that I think Christian rock tends to be bad is not because Christianity makes for bad artists, but because like you are putting you're putting a constraint on the art form other than quality, like other than goodness. Like
Yeah.
you're saying it has to have this, it has to adhere to this ideology. Like the same way that like I'm sure if you wanted to create an artificial category of like Marxist rock, that would suck too, as a rule. And you'd have a couple Sufjan Stevens in there to stand out, you know? But like conscious rap is a significant category in rap that people are aware of and think about and talk about. What do you make of it? Because you said a couple examples, some of which I liked more than others, but who cares what I think? What should we know or think about conscious rap or consciousness in rap?
I think conscious rap is it's been present for the last 20 or so years. It is a very loose genre and not connected at all music by its aesthetic or in a musical or lyrical sense. It's just connected by the fact that the rappers seem to be more alive in the sense that they rap about or talk about directly or indirectly the political, social, or cultural issues.
They seem to be more alive, you said?
Like more alive too, right? Lyric.
Oh,
like,
okay. Like
yeah.
more in touch with things happening. And this is related to like the derivation of the now like much bastardized term woke. Like I say woke. I like being woke, being conscious, being aware of things, right? Is this
I mean, and in that sense, all these terms are incredibly vague and almost meaningless, right? But these rappers will talk more about political issues than other rappers, and apart from that, I think there's very little about them that's very special. They tend to be the good ones tend to be very good lyricists, much better than most other rappers. The bad ones tend to be the ones who rant and write very bad metaphors and similes and are bad lyricists, much like most rappers and most everyone is bad at most things, right?
Well, what does it mean to say the good ones tend to be very good lyricists? Like, is it like they tend to be better? Like, what is the
they tend to be better than the most mainstream. They tend to be better than mainstream rappers or popular rappers.
Like the best conscious rappers are better than the best mainstream rappers.
Yes, in most cases, yes.
Why? Why would that be?
Often because I think they're both they're aware of the mainstream and often play off the mainstream but subvert its principles. Like you get this with a lot of Kendrick Lamar's later albums that they use sort of the mainstream types of trap music, but intermix that type of very popular rap with a political agenda, but often place that, but also instead of rapping explicitly about how everything's bad and everything needs to be changed, they put in more implicit or more image-based lyrics. So in that sense, they play off the popular mainstream hip hop that surrounds them and often have a more complex lyrical ability to capture sort of their political view in lyrics that they're less didactic and more image based in that
right sense.
I
mean, all of that makes sense as far as like why that would make them good, but like why as a category would the best conscious or political rappers be better than the best mainstream? Like that's the thing I can't quite get my head, because because boy, that could not be less true for poetry.
I mean, aren't all poets conscious poets? So I don't can you make a distinction about sort of mainstream poets who aren't conscious poets in that sort of way?
Well, but conscious, I mean, conscious in this sense means something very specific, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't, because I mean, conscious is a little bit like it's like a political slogan in a way, because it's saying like, if you were conscious, you would be saying X. Whereas like, presumably some of the mainstream some of the unconscious mainstream rappers might well be just as aware, but they're talking about something else. Like there's something else to talk about.
Maybe.
Is that not?
But I think there's a smallness of there's a smaller pool of subject matters in mainstream rap music that isn't political. I mean, conscious is a very vague term, and maybe I misspoke when I said the best conscious rappers. when I sort of place the best of that genre as better than another genre. Well, I guess what I mean is that by that is that when you come to sort of mainstream rap as a genre, its subject matter is going to be, if not conscious, is going to be basically about fucking women, having parties, and living a sort of life and gloating about how expensive, how rich you are, and that is a very fair thing to do, right? And it's based, and like, if one's come from like poverty, right, and then suddenly smashed into riches with this sort of massive capitalist industry wants to turn you into sort of music machine, then that's a fair subject. But that small selection of subject covers a vast amount of rap. So when I say the best conscious rappers are better than the best popular rappers, I guess what I'm saying is the best conscious rappers often have a wider variety of subject matter, and often that variety is tinged with the political, and that they can often use and parody the music of rappers who mainly focus upon parties or drinking. They can often use or parody that music and complexify that music with their own specific, more complex and politically tinged lyricism.
Okay, I mean, so that argument makes a lot of sense to me, that the best rap, basically like the best rappers have a broader range of subject matter, and some of that range includes the political.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
As well as other things.
Because some of that range includes the political, they'd be classified as conscious.
Right.
Even if not all of that range included the political.
Sure. But then why would that not, like, why is that not true? I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but like, I'm trying to think about, you know, like, again, like contemporary for me in poetry means like the last 100 years. But like, are the best poets who write about politics?
No.
But why not? Why is that? Why does that principle not hold then? I mean, like Yeats has a pretty fucking broad range, and he writes great political poems and great love poems, and great, you know. But like,
the problem with political is hard to define when it comes to poetry, because you can claim so many things are implicitly political, right? You can claim. I mean, do you think The Wasteland is a political poem? Because it probably you could make a very good definition there. It is.
Yeah. Well, maybe so part of what, I mean, so I think maybe part of what ends up happening is that if you are a rapper who does not merely and only write about having sex and being rich and committing crimes, then you're conscious. Like, because I also think of like, maybe conscious, maybe all conscious means as a broad category is not limited by this very narrow traditional range of subject matters.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And I think, I think in some ways it's a falsity, but I think in other ways it is a way of showing, of saying, oh, this rapper is a little bit different or a little bit weird, in that they seem to have a perspective beyond these certain topics to encompass a wider range of topics, and that immediately becomes, in some sense, politicized.
Yeah. So he to briefly return to this article, Gopnik does make this point that, like, I'm so tired of having, because it's like anytime somebody makes a defensive rhyme, they feel obliged to bring up this thing about rhymes being predictable or not, and he makes so much of the unexpected rhyme, and how it's the big prize in like rhyming poetry and rhyming verse is finding an unexpected rhyme. And like, I definitely know poets who get excited when they find a somewhat unusual rhyme, or more often it's not when they discover a rhyme or have what he calls a find, but when they simply make a rhyme work that might not work. Like, I know, and I definitely have some thoughts about, like, well, I don't just want to do shelf and self and breath and death, but like, he just makes so much of this, and it seems so silly to me. I don't want to, like, I've talked about that elsewhere, but I will just say, like, because he has this like pretty lengthy spiel about how English is rhyme poor, and so it has all of these consequences, and so much of rap is just trying to adapt to the, like, what a terrible rhyming language English is, and how English is really only for alliteration. I just wanted to, like, read an excerpt from A. Stallings' rhyme manifesto that Alice and I talked about before, because I just think, like, she puts this notion to bed really elegantly. She says,
"Can we both read excerpts? Because I have an excerpt from."
Oh, please, please do. So she says, "English is not rhyme poor. It is only uninflected. On the meaning, I believe that like in many languages, like Romance languages, where there is where that are rhyme rich, often all that really means is that words have the same ending attached to them because of grammar.
Yeah.
So she says, on the contrary, English has a richness in rhyme across different parts of speech, whereas in many other languages, rhyme is often merely a coincident jingle of accidents. So I think that's a pretty strong, like, and it's not just, it's parts of speech, and it's also different rhyming across different linguistic roots. Like you can rhyme Germanic words with Latinate words, and like that's part of the basically what I think she's saying is like rhyme is fun in English in a way that it isn't in purer languages. But yeah, you go ahead.
No, well, my quote is slightly different, but yeah, no, rhyme is probably loud. It's much more louder and vaster in English, right, than it is in different languages. I imagine sort of in Italian and French, the rhyme is subtler and softer, right, especially with words with similar root endings. While in English, the rhyme calls attention to itself much more, and that is sort of the. And I agree with Stallings, and I think there's an excitement. I think even more in revolutionizing old rhyming pairs that have been done, that people say have been done to death, and you find some new fascinating way of doing sight or light and night or breath and death, right? That seems to me in a way much more exciting than just finding your orange/syringe rhyme, right?
Okay, yeah, orange and syringe is nice. I mean, just it's wrench rhyme, but I mean that's quite nice. But no, I mean, I totally agree. And she says like there are no tired rhymes, there are no forbidden rhymes. Yeah.
No, this article got me thinking about why I rhyme in the first place, because it seems to me harder to defend rhyme than it does to defend meter. I think it's pretty easy to defend meter in poetry because meter is basically the very surface universal at root level control of the language itself. And I mean, Ryan and How to Think Like a Poet talks about how meter is, has this long passage on meter, which I totally agree with. And I think meter is essential to any poet writing anything, even if they're not writing something that's strictly metrical, say, that's quote unquote free. But rhyme is a different case in that sense. And I was reading an article. I was reading Jerry Hill's collected essays, as you do, and
slacking off from your studies again.
I was. God bless me. And I came to his long essay on a poem by Henry Vaughan, which rhymes night with light, which is a pretty, used rhyme.
Yeah.
And after a sort of page-long listing of every time Vaughan has used the light and night rhyme in his poems, which turns out to be quite a bit, Hill comes up with these few paragraphs, which I think maybe, although they're probably almost as wordy as this New York article, do offer something of a more interesting take on rhyme.
Yeah.
So I'll read out. One is impelled or drawn to inquire whether that metaphysical rapture that metaphysical retort built to existence between certain English rhyme pairings is the effect of commonplace rumination or the cause of it. Auden, in New Year's letter, makes womb and tomb a trick of his devil's sophistry, implying the easy availability of rhyme as complicitous with our trite melancholy and angst. Sir Thomas Brownie, meditating in 1658 on funeral urns, making our last bed like our first, nor much unlike the urns of our nativity, may cause one to suppose that speculative pseudo-logic works independently of the gravitational pull of words. Yet he too is rhyming, in quotes, in a sense, only with shapes, not sounds. Sigurd Burckhardt suggests that a pun is the creation of a semantic identity between words whose phonetic identity is, for ordinary language, the merest coincidence. Heard in this way, all rhyming is punning, as seen in the light of hermetical philosophy. All creation is a form of rhyming, or union of elemental extremes. And I think in that last sentence, at least, there is something fascinating, that rhyming is a yoking of extremes, or a yoking of concepts together. And in some ways, I think the best sonic rhymes are the ones that take conceptual extremes and rhyme them together. And you do get sort of a yoking of the conceptual extreme with the sonic similarity. And that seems to be a very exciting part of rhyme. Like I get very excited by the idea of light and night, because they do place complete contradictions to each other in very sonically similar language, right? And that is, to me, one of the major elements of rhyme for maybe light verse, but also for serious poetry and contemporary poetry now today.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think there's just at the level of like simple pleasure, we see this with like those rhymes in English where that are simply a matter of two words sharing the same ending, like dedication and meditation, are the least satisfying rhymes. And similarly, rhyming a series of plural nouns that end with the same sound is as a decreasing thrill. And as with, just as like if you read Tennyson's In Memoriam, he like so scrupulously and consistently only rhymes plural nouns with singular verbs that at a certain point it would be more thrilling and surprising if he just rhymed two singular verbs.
Yeah.
But like there is we understand intuitively that there's a pleasure to a like a coincidence of surprise and recognition, like that the two things don't perfectly match, but they do have this undeniable link, this like pre-intellectual link that like even a baby can understand, which is just that the rhymes, the sounds match in this particular pleasing way, which is, and it's like, it is, I wonder about like the development of these different conventions in like prosodies across history, because alliteration is wonderful. Like I just reread Beowulf, and like a lot of it, like there is in a lot of a lot of the English, contemporary poetry I like best. There's a very strong use of like in many cases fairly consistent use of alliteration. I mean, Hausmann alliterates almost constantly, but there's something about rhyme that feels more, I don't want to say more final because it is literally more final, but it's more undeniable. It's more ostentatious. It's, I don't know. And that may be an English thing. Like maybe that's really not the case in French, particularly when you don't have, maybe part of it is not, it's not just that English uses different roots, but it also is a language that relies heavily on stress.
Yes.
Because like in French, where you're smearing through all the syllables in a way that doesn't bounce as much, and the endings are, it's less remarkable when they rhyme. Maybe it really doesn't, but like in English, boy, rhyme has a snap to it that is a little bit unlike anything else the language can do.
Yeah, he says that a good poem sounds like the click of a well-made box closing, and that is precisely what rhyme does. I mean, I was going to ask you straight up, why do you rhyme?
Yeah. I think just because I like how it sounds. And I think also it feels, I mean, I write some poems I write in blank verse at this point. And that, like, I have in a different life, I write plays. So that's part of, I mean, to me, that feels very linked in fiction. And so, but I feel often like I feel more convinced that the poem comes together when it rhymes. Like it's funny. I have found that I now find it easier to read and understand metrical rhyming poems than I do free verse poems, which shouldn't really be the case. But I think I've just like, it's like my poem reading and thinking cognition has like picked up that pattern to it. I mean, it has made me wonder and worry whether I should find ways to shake that up.
Oh, I mean,
with
I
my
think
writing. Yeah.
a lot of metrical poets get that right. I mean, Shane. I read somewhere Shane saying that he couldn't write, he can't think of poems now in free verse. He can't think of a line of poetry in his head in free verse when he's trying to compose
Yeah.
something. And yeah, I think that's a you get your mind into that, into the metrical and rhyme pattern so much that it sort of creates almost structures in comprehension, right? In four. And
Yeah.
rhyme is a great sort of architectural technique. I think more and more I think of poetry as building. And like when people say poetry comes from the heart and you should write down your feelings, I think no, fuck off, build something out of language. And for to me, rhyme is a part of that building, so the building of a tower of words,
Yeah.
or a shape of words, and that I think is a truly exciting thing about rhyme. I mean, I've been doing a lately. I've been writing a lot of poems that do rhyme almost cheap because they rhyme with words that are split across a line. I think I had a poem recently. I rhymed night with sight, but I put sight less. And I had another poem where I rhymed face with grace, but it was graceless. And
Hmm.
I do like that sort of sense of
Yeah.
both deferring and putting rhyme together.
Yeah,
But
Shane
maybe
does
that's
that a fair amount. I mean, he
yeah.
does it even like not. He
Mm,
will even break words like not at the syllable.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. What? Because I mean, there's another thing that, like Ryan will do fairly often, which is break a sentence one word. Like the sentence will end like one word or one syllable after the line break with the rhyme on it. So
Mm,
the sentence like very harshly fights the rhyme because you feel like
yeah.
you want to read through to the end of the sentence, and rather than having like a tidy caesura to give you a couple syllable like a couple feet after the rhyme, it's really right next to it, so it really
Oh,
clashes with the
that's
rhyme.
good. Yeah.
I It's funny because I hate it. Like to my ear, it's terrible, but I know it's something he does deliberately, and I know and like with Shane, like
Mm,
Shane almost will like write in meter and rhyme with like an aggressive attempt to fight against it in some way. Like
yeah, and
he
you're
sent me a really beautiful poem recently that was much more straightforwardly lyric and lyrical in its like patterning. But yeah, I don't know what I think that doesn't bother me as much as the like Ryan's kind of near misses do.
that. I
But
mean,
yeah, I don't know.
there seems to be. I like to call it something like a radical enjambment when you sort of
Hmm.
break a line so violently against it. And it seems to me almost like a sort of a rancorous fight within the poem itself. Like the poem is struggling against its own constituents of building. And I like that because there is an energy in it and a violence in it that often, when applied to the subject, seems not even mimetic, but just as if the concept is flowing back into the materials the poem is working within. And I find that exciting.
Yeah, I so all right. So there were these three lines from the Gopnik piece toward the end that my response to them was like, I agree with these, especially when it comes to my own poetry,
Mm-hmm.
but they seem like crazy things to say generally. I was suspecting that like you would strongly disagree with these. That it feels like
Mm.
he's making these kind of broad, objective statements that to me are like, oh, they're totally consistent with like my personal rules of thumb. But like, like aren't there so many people who find these to be
Mm.
not the case at all? So he says, and they're all kind of circling the same rough idea. Uh, he does like I think it's one of the places where he like sort of smartly backs away from the whole moral angle and just deals with like the effect and the pleasure is when he says that the key when using ostentatious rhymes is that they be kept inside recognizably idiomatic speech, which like I also, in order for me to read a poem and enjoy it, I really need to be able to hear an at least theoretical human voice. But I know that's totally not the case for a lot of people. And like there was some poem Shane said like, "Oh, I love this" on Twitter recently, and I read it and I thought, "Oh my god, it's so hard to read." Like it's like really smart and really like it's like 80 caesuras per line and like it's totally unvoice like and it's just like language crunched down into this sort of pure concentrated form that I just found like totally miserable to get through. But I also like, I get that people genuinely enjoy that. Then he goes on, he says, near rhyme, half rhyme, off rhyme, odd rhyme, assonance and identities, slant rhymers, all of it is potentially compelling, and none of it is a sanctuary from sense. What's always at stake with literature and lyrics is their relation to the world. And then the very end of the essay, he says, we cannot help test rhyme with reason. And like, I agree and like apply those statements to my work, but also like, don't so many people like so much work that totally contradicts those claims?
Yeah, I mean, doesn't nonsense poetry just contradict that completely?
Right. I mean, it just seems like is that just doesn't seem. And even when it's not purely a contradiction, like, you know, it's not that Jeffrey Hill at his most dense and esoteric, or Toby Martinez de las Rivas, or whatever Canadian guy I forget that Shane like it's not that they're nonsense poets, but it does seem a little bit out of like inaccurate to say that like what's at stake is their relation to the world, or we must test rhyme with reason. Those just seem like not. It seems like one kind of poetry, and maybe the kind of poetry I most respond to. But like, there's so much. It just seems like yet another instance of this guy thinking that all like verse is just musical theater lyrics.
Yeah, and the second two seem to me specifically quite vague. They're assertive, and yet they seem very vague. Like, what could he define testing the poem against the world? I mean, he defines the sense with the violets are blue, are they? Question mark ending, which is just terrible. It's I cringe
sugar
so
sweet,
much.
and you is the it's terrible.
Yeah, no, the second one though, I hate vague yet assertive comments. I find them a lot in sort of language poetry manifestos, but yeah, they're terrible. The Coming back to sort of voices and what you say about the voice, I think I differ in that if I find a poem that voice seems somehow different to a typical human voice, or I can't imagine a speaker, I find that exciting because I find I have to put myself into a new perception of what a speaker is and what a speaker can do, and that seems to be very exciting, at least from my perspective. But I can understand how maybe you are drawn to a more idiomatic speech than I am. I've never particularly liked conversational poetry in that way. I've always found conversation. I've always thought, well, if I want to hear conversation, I'll go and talk to someone. I want poetry that does something new or redefines my understanding of speaking, I guess, in that sense.
I mean, I think conversational is maybe more limited than I want to suggest, because I think like there are I think like only in a very loose sense are like Browning's monologues conversational. I think there's
and Houseman isn't conversational at all, right?
No. And I mean, so I think like I don't mind an elevated voice. I mean, like or Hecht. I mean, Hecht always sounds like he's feigning a British accent as he did in life. But like I need at least to me. It's not even that like I prefer to feel like I'm listening to a human being sitting at the fireside with a glass of bourbon. It's that like I have a hard time understanding it if I can't suss out the presence of a human voice. So I found, just for the sake of conversation, the poem that I was thinking of the other day, that Shane said, love this poem. And this is by Camille Ralphs, whom I've never heard of. It's called Able as Cain. And we should say that Shane has a new book called Cain Named the Animal, and there's the title, the poem that the title comes from is a poem in which he specifically talks about Cain and Abel. So partly that, I imagine this is picking up on a theme he's obviously invested in. But
it's a great book. You should read it. But yeah.
Oh no, it is good. Yeah, it's a great book. So this is a sonnet. The meter is another question because it's so dense and It's like it's hard to identify a cadence. But here, I'll just read it aloud, and maybe I'll get more of it out of it this time. I just read it once before, but Abel as Cain by Camille Ralphs. Black light, restless and backless, roiling night, two legion raging tempests, testy sound, bounds over boundless hours, coils of ground, too soon the noonday demons teeming, bright. Wait, plough of all, and page and powers call. Come, Mayday, let my heydayed house and pen then rest in comfort, spared despair once, then come self, dumb self, torpor corporeal, if come it must, nonplussed, dashed on the sod one self lies, one red-handed, trustless man wanders the bloody-sandaled land of Nod. Which one am I? No one's but everyone. For love and God, and for the love of God, the starry ooze and grace erased seem gone. And she's included some of the little accent marks that Hopkins. So it's identified as in the style of Hopkins' terrible sonnets, and she uses some of his little accent marks he likes to use on some of the otherwise unaccented words.
I was going to say that it was incredibly Hopkinsian, right? I mean, I kept thinking,
yeah. It's very consciously, reminiscent of Hopkins.
I thought, a lot of sort of the alliterative and internal rhyme effects got more fascinating and starker when she reached the Cain scene with a man wandering in. I don't have it in front of me, but a man wandering in fields of blood or something. I thought that the sort of vulture of the poem really got me.
One red-handed, trustless man wanders the bloody-sandaled land of Nod.
Yeah, because suddenly she had a sort of concrete image to work with, and then she applied the effects, and we reperceive, and it's sort of a reperceiving of the image, and in that way, she's working, I think, those materials into perception itself. But you don't hear a human, you don't hear a voice human enough to understand it.
I mean, like, it's funny, you heard it once through without seeing it. This is the second time I've read it, and I have it sort of visually in front of me, and you understood it better than I did. Like, you kind of like, even that, like, one red-handed, trustless man wanders the bloody-sandaled land of Nod. Like, looking at it again after you've identified it as like the Cain scene, clearly I can see that, but like, it's so, the poem is so dense with sound and so like anti-idiomatic that even though it includes lines like which one am I, no one's but every, like, clearly there is a character speaking, but no human even in a play talks like this. And so I can't track the meanings of the words according to any like theoretical perspective. Like there's no voice I can trace, and so I can't follow the thread. Like I can sort of like rigorously go through phrase by phrase and try to construct a kind of a grammatical sense that one could sort of force out of it, but it's almost impossible for me to follow it. Like it feels it's the way it makes me like, so there's a thing that dyslexic people sometimes say about reading, where they'll say that like the words won't sit still on the page. Like they have a hard, when they look at the words, it's hard for them. Sometimes they'll like either use a finger to trace the line, or they have different tricks and tools they'll use, because literally it's like they can't get the words to lie still in front of them. That's what it's like for me in a poem like this. Like I can't track the voice, so I can't follow what's going on, so I can get almost no meaning from it.
Do you feel like you're wandering in a sort of field of meaning?
I feel like I'm wandering in a field of words. I wish I were wandering in a field of meaning.
I mean, I guess you don't wish you're wandering red-handed in a field, but I guess
not, in the land of Nod, bloody sandaled. No, I mean, so I think I'm not a strong natural reader, and I think there are plenty of people who probably have. Maybe I'm somewhere on like a spectrum of reading ability, and there are other people who fall elsewhere. But this is exactly the kind of poem that just leaves me totally adrift. But I also recognize that there's a lot of stuff here to like, and that there are people who really like it. But yeah, despite being written in written in very respectable rhyme, and I think meter, though, like it would be hard to scan it just off the top of my head because so much of it's monosyllabic, and it's so like against the cadence of speech.
Yeah, I tried to keep on with it, but there were a lot of trochees. I think it's probably going for something like Hopkins in Stress, but yeah, I'd have to hear
Yeah.
it again.
And I just say I find Hopkins also almost unreadable, like more readable than this, but pretty like I know like every smart poetry reading person I know prizes Hopkins as a poet, and I know enough to like accept that verdict, but like I fucking can't stand reading him. It just like it's so pain. It just feels like just fucking talk, just stop, just settle down, Gerard.
Oh god, I love Hopkins.
I'm sure you do. I know you. Yeah. I know. I don't doubt this at all.
Yeah, no, I kind of know what you mean. I mean, yeah, I get that. I mean, I when sort of a poem. Oh, there was a poem you cited on a very early episode. It was the one about the "don't tell the poets" thing, and someone had written an article about that social media phenomenon, and they had a sort of a
Oh
prize
yeah,
win.
that was the
Yeah,
guy who included his own poem in the article.
yeah, that prize win, that poem
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
selected. Oh god, I got like 10 lines in, and no, I hate that type of poetry. I hate the sort of the postmodern knowingness about it. I hate the sort of bland, chopped storytelling that doesn't go anywhere. So you hate Hopkins, and I hate that type of poetry.
Yeah, it was funny that I also found that poem very unpleasant to read, but it was, if anything, it felt yeah. I mean, yeah. There's plenty of ways poems can fail.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but no, this is a strange but yeah, it poems like this, which like probably, to be honest, do adhere to Gopnik's rules more than I would give them credit for. But I think of poems like this when I think that he's just like weirdly presumptuous in saying we cannot help test rhyme with reason, and none of it is a sanctuary from sense.
I very much doubt Godwin reads much poetry. I mean, there was a lot of anger on a Ratosphere when he said, "What's left of free verse today?" And people are going, "Well, what's left of? No, no, sorry, not what's left of free verse.
What's left of formal verse?
Of light verse. Today.
Oh, light verse.
And people go, and people, what's left of light? Have you not read all these journals? And there are a lot of light verse journals. I don't. They come up a lot of Ratosphere. I don't like light verse. Probably to do with my sort of pretentious age, and I'll get older and realize that it's very, very good and has very sort of deep moral conclusions hidden within the lightness, like programs like BoJack Horseman have. But yeah, no, I don't like light verse at the moment. But yeah, the New Yorker stopped publishing light verse. Light verse continues happily on without the New Yorker, without Godwin's kind of attention. But yeah, no, I mainly agree with what Alice said to you. I think this article does deserve to be read mostly. I find Alice really interesting because she seems to me so different. I mean, I said this to you on WhatsApp. She seems to be very different in terms of sort of poetic sensibilities than I am. I mean, I think she likes Frank O'Hara, I think, and I've never managed to like Frank O'Hara. But it's really good that you've got Alice to sort of balance out my Hillian rancorousness and sort of modernist pretension.
yeah, and I'm probably somewhere in the middle. Though it's funny, Alice, both in her poetry, like in her own poetry, and in some of her affiliations, I think. But like I find like she is more friendly with what you might call experimental poetry than I am, and so I think like there may be a place where the two of you converge and far away from me. But I think broadly speaking, I might be somewhere on the spectrum between the two of y'all. That was my conversation with Cameron. You can find Cameron again on Erratosphere at WT Clark. You can check the show notes for a link. Thank you all for listening, and do keep your ears open for. I'm going to be bringing on the lyricist and composer Ian Brandon and Anne Marie Thompson, who are theater people, poetry people, musical people, And I think they may have some additional thoughts on the Gopnik piece. But for now, that is today's show. Again, go to sleeverickets.substack.com if you want to sign up for a free subscription, and I will give you a week as soon as I see your name pop up. That's all I got. Jesus, I'm fucking tired. With any luck, we will be speaking to you all again very soon. Until then.